Cybersecurity for beginners, career advice, how to get started in cybersecurity free and cheap, things that you can do today to get the ball rolling. Okay, so today we're going to do number 9, cybersecurity for beginners, how to study your time, part 9. So I put up a few shorts, and I plan on doing more, so you might want to look for those. One's cybersecurity for dummies. Another one is cybersecurity essentials. And another one is computer security basics. They're just basically, we're looking at those books and going over the table of contents. I'm not saying to buy those books, but if you can get them cheap, I'd grab them. I've talked about teaching forever. I've taught since 1979. Everywhere I've worked, they made me the trainer because I was a college boy. Students always ask me, should I do this or should I do that or should I do the other thing? What's the best thing? Meaning, should I take a class? Should I use videos? Should I buy books? What? And I always reply, do it all. Everything helps. A philosopher said, you learn to play the flute by playing the flute. So, buy a few computers, some books, some courses, build your home network slowly. You don't have to get carried away. Start with one computer, desktop or laptop, whatever you prefer. Invest in yourself, your career, and your future. I have to be careful saying things like these quotes, because sometimes, the internet will say, hey, there's no actual proof that they said that, and I'll get dinged on the internet. So I looked it up, Yahoo AI. This is the important part here. This reflects his broader philosophy that knowledge and skills are best acquired through practice and direct experience, rather than theoretical understanding. This idea aligns with his teaching on the importance of engaging with life and learning through action. That's great, right? Of course. You want to learn to play guitar, sooner or later you got to pick up a guitar. But the reason why I bring that up is we want to do a lot of reading. Reading's good, but I found that I do a lot of skimming too. I look for good sections. So here I'd add, that's true to a certain extent, but that's like saying learn human surgery through experimentation, right? You want that doctor to go to class, read a few books. You've got to study books, videos, courses. Mentoring is also very important. If you can find a mentor in the business, in your area, that's what YouTube is great for too, right? Here I put ChatGPT, when were books invented? They go back 2,000-3,000 years, but they're writing out of stone. I've got a funny story here. In my younger days, I was working in a college town, and the woman I was dating, she wasn't really sickly. She was in good shape, but she was always in the hospital for something. Her back would go out, or one thing or another. She'd go in for a week, And it was a big college town, big medical school, big law school, so it was kind of fun to be around. And I'd hang out at the hospital, visiting her, going to the lunchroom, go down lunchroom, have a hot dog and things like that. One time I was in an elevator, me and a young doctor, a total stranger. We're quiet in the elevator, just riding the elevator. He looks over at me and goes, "I'm working for 25 cents an hour." Yeah, that was the only thing, that was the only conversation that we had. And I just looked at him. So my point is, don't take out college loans if you can avoid them. I have a video coming out soon on what you should get paid as far as this business goes. I want to briefly go over how you should use your time trying to study. Of course, your schedule will be different, but I just want to give you a general idea of what I'm thinking. 4 hours per day using hardware. Whatever you have. If you have a Windows machine, study the control panel. Things in the control panel. We've talked about that. If all you have is a phone, study the settings. There's a lot in that little cell phone you have in your hand. The settings, that overwhelms me. There's a lot of stuff in there. 4 hours a day reading. That's really not that much. It sounds like a lot, but it's not that much. 4 hours, you might get through 20 pages. 2 hours a day exercising. Don't forget to exercise. Use a treadmill if you can, or just slow walk, some light jogging. Light jogging. Don't get carried away. You don't want to wear out your ankles. About 40 minutes a day. Walk 20 minutes, jog and walk 20 minutes. What I do is I walk for 20 minutes, and then I walk and jog for 20 minutes. Walk for a minute, jog for a minute. Walk for a minute, jog for a minute. And some lightweight lifting. Don't get carried away with the weights. You don't want to rip a muscle. Don't get carried away with the weights, because if you work out too much, you'll be tired. You won't have the energy to study. If you don't have weights, find something that you can lift. Water jugs, old tire in the backyard, whatever. Try to sleep at least 7 hours a day. I think the experts recommend 8. I usually do 6 or 7, but I know in my younger days it was a lot less, because I was studying late, getting up early, And then, you might have an 8-hour job. You got family and chores. We all know that takes a lot of time. Every class I taught, I always told them, don't buy a house. Young people, they always want to buy a house. Buy a house, buy a house. But a house keep up takes a lot of time. There's always something breaking. There's always something to trim. You got to cut the grass, trim a tree, trim the bushes. There's always something. Rent an apartment with a lease that you can break upon transfer. There's actually a line in some leases, break lease upon transfer. So if you get a job out of town, you can move. When you have a career, you got to be willing to get up and move. Within reason. I wouldn't move to the other side of the country. You can if you want, but I've seen videos online where people move 2,000 miles away, work there for a few months and get laid off. Just another part of the state, or maybe the next state over. That wouldn't be so bad. But that's your call. So 8 hours daily study. I heard years ago reading 3 books on a topic makes you an expert. I'd say 3 books is a great start on becoming an expert. I guess it depends on what topic, right? In general, 10,000 study hours makes you an expert. Now, we're talking a pretty big topic here. So I'd say take this with a grain of salt. So if we break that down for 10,000 hours, 8 hours a day times 7 days is 56 hours. 52 weeks times this 56 hours is 2,900 hours. So if we go 10,000 hours divided by 2,900 is 3.5 years. So 3.5 years at 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, is your 10,000 hours. Remember, not all of that is reading. There's lab work and working with hardware. This hardware thing, installing the operating system is like a good start. When I was taking a Java program at a big college, I heard a story of people with doctorate degrees in computer programming have never installed an operating system. They focus just on the computer programming. There's a lot of math and stuff like that there. We all have our specialty. It depends on what you want to do. Okay, so something you can do. You can study Kali Linux. There's free online docs. Doc is short for document. It's files to read. There are many good Linux distributions, also called distro. Once you know one Linux, you kind of know them all. With small changes. It seems like every version does something just a little different, but they're all more or less the same. It's like once you know how to drive a car, you know how to drive all cars with small changes, like where's the blinkers and where's the flashers and stuff like that. You should know them all within reason. You don't have to get carried away. Here's the Kali website. So Kali is the main Linux that people use for penetration testing as far as cybersecurity goes. Kali.org. When you're in cybersecurity, what they do is they test a computer system. They test it to see if they can penetrate it, to see how secure it is. Now, other versions of Linux do the same thing, but Kali has all the tools already installed. You can install them on the other systems too, but Kali already has the tools pre-installed. So Debian is a version of Linux. Just to go over this, Kali Linux is open source. Open source means the source code is available for you to look at. In general, it means that it's free. So here, open source refers to software or other creative technical work whose source code is publicly available. Source code is the code behind the application. It means anyone can view, use, modify, and share it under the terms of an open source license. Kali is an open source, so that's why they're saying open source here, Debian-based Linux distribution. Debian's one of the originals. It's been around for years. Geared toward various information security tasks, such as penetration testing, security research, computer forensics, and reverse engineering. So here they're saying geared towards various information security tasks. It's got all the tools built in. Penetration testing, what tools do you need to test a system? Security research, how do we make it better? Computer forensics. Forensic is after a crime occurs, they go in, collect all the information, take pictures, that's the forensics. Take fingerprints, stuff like that. What did the hacker do? And reverse engineering You find a virus, you open it up, study the code, see how it worked, see what it did to your system. You reverse engineer it. So here it says Kali Linux is not about its tools, nor the operating system. Kali Linux is a platform. So here's the Kali Linux desktop. It kind of just looks like a normal desktop. It's got your menu here. Got some icons up here. They're showing you some of the tools here. You're showing Kali Linux on your phone. We'll get more into this later on, but you can download Kali for free and install it on a computer. There's other ways to install it though too. That's what they're doing here. They're showing you all the different ways that you can install it. In the future, I'm kind of thinking we'll do a bare metal install. I'll take one of the computers I have downstairs and install Kali Linux on it. And then we'll do the virtual machine thing too, where we'll install probably VirtualBox on this computer right here, and then we'll download Kali to that virtual machine. And while Windows is running, you can actually run Kali Linux inside that virtual machine. So that's probably the easiest way to get started if you have a Windows machine. Something else you can do is download Kali Linux and install it on a USB and boot to the USB. And then I'm into Docker too, so we might load up Kali into a Docker container. See how that works. But that's a whole nother topic. Main thing I wanted to show you was here is the documentation. So you can read about it. Read about installing it. Install it on a virtual machine. They're showing you the different companies here. VMware is one, VirtualBox is one, Hyper-V. I think VirtualBox is the popular free one. ARM would be like a Mac. I think it's an ARM processor. So ARM is for devices that use the ARM processor. So I did a search for ARM processor on ChatGPT. It says Apple, Qualcomm, Samsung. Yahoo AI said Mac computers use ARM processors, specifically Apple's custom designed chips known as Apple Silicon. These processors are based on ARM architecture and have been integrated into nearly all of new Macs since 2020. This transition from Intel's x86 architecture to ARM has improved performance and power efficiency in Mac devices. This Intel x86, that would be like the normal chips that we use in a regular desktop computer that runs Windows. The i3, i5, i7 that we were talking about. So it's either x86 and then ARM. would be the two big ones. And what they're doing here with this x86, the way it used to be was like the old days. Intel's chip, their main processor, I think it was like 286 was the earliest one. Here, let's check that out. Then it went to 386 and 486 and 586, and a fancy word for 5 was Pentium, and that's when they started coming out with the Pentiums. So, and then in the early days it was actually 32-bit. The processors were 32-bit. And then the more advanced ones came out to 64-bit. So you'll see x86 32, x86 64. Who makes x86 CPUs? Intel Core, i3, i5, i7, i9. So what is Intel x86? Intel x86 refers to processors, mainly to run Windows and Linux. Like these computers here, we can erase Windows and install Linux on them because it's the x86 architecture. And then here they're showing you the early ones. So 8086 was 1978. That goes way back, right? And then it was 186, 286, 386, 486. And that's what this X is for. That's what I'm trying to show you here. Was the X changed. Sometimes it was a 1, and then it became more advanced. It became a 2, became more advanced, became a 3, became a more advanced as 4. And 486, that was probably 1980s. I'm surprised they're not showing the 586. The 586 was the Pentiums. You probably remember the Pentiums. That was a fancy word for 586. And then when I first got into computers, like mid-90s, everything was 32-bit. All the computers, all the applications were 32-bit. And then they updated it to 64-bit. And then if you had old applications, they wouldn't run. You know, the new versions of Windows were 64-bit. And then if you had old applications that were written in 32-bit, they wouldn't run on 64-bit. Now they did kind of jimmy rig it, so some of the old applications would run on a 64-bit, but it was still a jimmy rigged operation. You might remember that's when people's scanners didn't work, people's printers didn't work, because they went from 32-bit to 64-bit. So on Amazon, I just searched for Kali Linux, and it brings up a bunch of books here. This PAC-T, I think we talked about PAC-T in a previous video. This Linux Basics for Hackers, these are usually really good books. They're human understandable. I wouldn't go with the Linux kernel programming or the development stuff. That's getting pretty involved. Embedded Linux programming, that would be a more advanced topic. These PAC-T books, see, I would go with this one because it's specific to Kali. See, if you go to PACTpub.com, here's the 3 subscriptions. So for $20 a month, you have access to 7,000 books, videos. If you pay by the year, It's $139 for the year, 18 months for $195. So let's see here, 196 divided by 18. That's $10 a month. You can't beat that. You have access to 7,000 books online, one free ebook or video a month, and then they'll sell you ebooks or videos for $5 each. 35% off print books. Ultimate Kali Linux book. The cookbooks are usually good. Here's the table of contents. Installing Kali and lab setup. Reconnaissance and scanning. And then it's showing you the details of chapter 1. So that looks like a good one. Okay, so I went out on ChatGPT and I said, where is Linux server used? Just trying to give you an idea of why you're studying it. And I did a search for where is Linux server used, right? There's a Linux server and a Linux user. Two separate things. What do you use Linux for? So you log in. The company has a Linux server. You log into the company system using the server. On Microsoft, it's called Active Directory. There's email servers. There's printer servers. There's database servers. Web servers. The main web server is Apache, and I'm sure there's a lot more. File servers, cloud storage, cloud application. These days they have as a service. You'll see everything under the sun as a service. I've even heard of ransomware as a service. You believe that? You can buy ransomware online. Firewall, use Linux as a firewall. A demilitarized zone. So here, let's do this. Let's just to give you a general idea of what I'm talking about here. How they set up a firewall in a demilitarized zone. Here, I'll click on images. And everybody seems to do it a little different. But like, here's the company. This is the company network. And then this would be your firewall. A Linux server with a firewall running on it. And then here's the internet. So see this area here, this would be the demilitarized zone. See here they're shown as, here's the public internet, goes through a first firewall, which would be a Linux server running a firewall. There's standalone firewalls too, and then this would be like the web servers and things like that. And then another firewall before you get to the company network. So like this area would be the demilitarized zone. This area is protecting the company network. And I looked at this the other day. Everybody seems to set them up a little different. So this is a good picture of what I'm trying to explain. See, here's the internet. goes through a firewall, and then this would be like the demilitarized zone. That would be like the company's web pages and things like that. Then it goes through another firewall, and this would be the company network, where the people do their work at their desk and things like that. Internal network, or LAN. LAN is just a fancy word for the company network inside the building. So it's basically just using Linux as a firewall. So just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, like this could be a firewall too, firewall as a rack, and it's probably just running a version of Linux or some type of embedded software that has a firewall on it. Cisco firewall, Cisco's the big name in networking. But what I'm saying here is we can use Linux to run a firewall. And there's actually a free firewall that you can study on Linux. So there's free stuff to read about computer security on the Kali website. You can download a Linux distro, burn it to a DVD, then boot it up and run Linux off the DVD. You actually boot to the DVD. It's called a live DVD, even from a Windows machine, and we'll do that. We talked about penetration testing, pen test. And that's something that I really want to stress. You learn to use Windows Server, you learn to use Linux Server, and you set them up so they can't be hacked, or at least to lessen the possibility. Being a good administrator to set the computer up so it's secure, to set the server up so it's secure. There's Kali Linux courses on Udemy. I think we talked about Udemy. That's a website that sells computer courses. And there's many other too. I think LinkedIn has their own. Those type of things might be kind of tough right now to understand. You watch the videos about the command line and they blow right through that stuff just like it's easy. But getting the hang of just the basic introduction of Linux is tough. We'll get to that, but I just wanted to cover some introductory stuff in the first few videos before we get to that. But in general, the Linux desktop, you start up Linux on your computer and it kind of looks like a Windows desktop with some differences, but it's what's running in the background is what makes it different. So just running a Linux desktop is easy, just like what you're doing here. You can surf the web, you can go to YouTube, you can go to eBay. It's the same type of deal. So that's easy. The tough part is doing the Linux administration, system administration, becoming a system administrator so you learn how to use the command line. Here is Udemy, and here's some of the courses on Linux, and you can usually watch a first couple of the courses for free. See, like here's here's a 15-minute preview, here's a 16-minute, so you get a half hour for free to see if you like it. Now what's nice about Udemy is they have sales, especially around holidays. You can get stuff really cheap. And then what's cool about Udemy, they started this plan. So for $14 a month, you have access to 26,000 of their top courses. That's a pretty good deal. Okay, so I think we'll call it a day there. And we'll save this stuff down here for next time. So this will be number 10. Okay, see ya. Bye.